Hello everybody, this is Shannon with Beads and Babble, back with another tutorial. This one is going to be on constructing these wrap bracelets. This is a single wrap bracelet, but you can use this technique to create the multi-wrap leather bracelets. It just depends on the size of the wrist and how many wraps you want. But today we're going to focus on the single because I think it's important to learn the technique. And then once you get the technique down, you can extend it to a longer multi-wrap bracelet. So I made these and I made them using different diameter leather cord. This is 1 millimeter. This is 1.5 millimeter. And this is 2 millimeter leather cord. Now, what I go by when I'm selecting the size of the cord that is going to basically be the spine of the bracelet. And it's going to be what holds, its rigidity and holds the weight of the beads. So the heavier the beads, the larger the cord you should use. I hope that makes sense. So these here are 5/0 seed beads, and I threw in a couple of discs for different texture and stuff, which are fine for this 1 millimeter leather cord. As you can see, it still holds its shape well, and it's kind of a more dainty. So if you were using, say, seed beads size 10/0, even 11/0, and 8/0, this would be great for it. Smaller beads, lighter weight beads, 1 millimeter diameter leather cord, fine with it. If you're going to get a little bit heavier, say larger seed beads, crystals, these are some brass, solid brass metal beads here, I would bump up the cord size to 1.5 millimeter, which is my favorite to use because I feel like it's the most, comfortable to wear. It's very, flexible. It also holds the beads, even the heavier weight beads, fairly well. And I just like the way that it feels when I'm wearing them. So I tend to go to the 1.5 millimeter leather cord when I'm making multi-wraps. Now, for a single wrap and you want a sturdy, more rigid, spine for your bracelet, 2 millimeter is the way to go, especially if you're using heavy gemstone beads. Then I would say yes, 2 millimeter leather cord's probably the way to go. And as you can see, I did a couple different finishes here. Like I did no dangles on this one, I did dangles on this one and this one. We started out with a macrame square knot, a sequence, or I should say a set of 3 square knots, and then I began the ladder stitch, is what the stitch is here that constructed these bracelets and what you'll be learning today. I was using a large shank button that will accommodate the leather cord to go through. It only has to pass through it once. So that's great. I have some charms where I attach the charm directly onto one of the cords of leather. And on this one, I attached a charm bell and then the charm here. Depends on which you like the best, what aesthetically is pleasing to you. You can mix it up like I do. Also, you can see I used a variety of different beads, including stacking beads on each sequence or rung of the bracelet. I say rung because the ladder stitch. And then you can also change up the type of beads. These are crystals, 8x6 millimeter crystals, 32/0 seed beads, and a stack of metal beads there. I also really like the way the 9x4 millimeter bugle beads look too. They stack really nice in between the leather. And as you can see, I alternated seed beads with metal beads here. These are some wood beads. So you can really go to town with your design and you can really make a very pretty textured and visually pleasing bracelet with all different components. You're not limited to one size of bead. You can use, and you can also stack these single ones for a stack if you choose, rather than making a very long wrap bracelet. So I'm going to set those to the side. So I'm going to be using 28 inches of 2mm round leather cord. This is going to be the spine of the bracelet. I'm going to be using a check glass button with a nice shank. I'm going to use a variety of metal beads, and then I'm going to be using these multicolored agate 6mm gemstone beads, which are really pretty, and they come like this strung. I do have them available in the store. And then I'm going to also be using this kind of light brown fine C-long cord. It's antique brown. It is 0.4 millimeters in diameter, or I should say, yeah, diameters. And the reason I'm doing sizing down, because usually I'll go with, on these, I use the regular Eslon Tex 210 cording for all of these, because the hole sizes of the beads allow that. So I try to use the thickest cord that the holes in my beads will allow, just for us having it be very sturdy and durable through wear. I have a thread burner, which I'll be using, but if you don't, you can always substitute the GS Hypo Cement for finishing the ends here with the square knots to keep them secure. I'll be using a thread burner because I like it. It's quick, it's easy, it seals it. You'll need some flush cutters for cutting the leather, some sharp shears for cutting the Eslon C-long cord, and I have a pair of flat nose and chain nose pliers here just for putting on any jump rings or pulling the needles through the cord and the beads. Sometimes that becomes an issue. I have 2 large eye needles here that I'll be threading the Eslon cord onto. I'm going to be setting all this to the side here while I work. I also have a macrame board that I will be constructing the bracelet on. If you don't have one of these, you can tape your work to your desk and do the same thing. So the first step here is taking the leather and bringing the 2 cut ends together, and then we're going to thread the button onto the cord, the round leather cord, and we're going to bring it down to the halfway point. Okay. And then I am going to attach this. Really not going to attach it. What I'm going to do is I'm kind of going to anchor it here. And then I'm going to bring the ends down to the bottom, and I'm going to put them in the slots just like that. And I'll probably raise that up, the button up there so you can see it. And then I'm going to take the fine Eslon cord and I'm going to cut 1.5 yards. For this length of a bracelet, that should be more than enough. And if you are doing longer, that's why I always say start off with a single layer bracelet, because you'll be working with a very long piece of Eslon cord, which can get, tangled and stuff. It gets frustrating. But once you get the technique down with a single, you can definitely venture on to making a multi-wrap. So here I am going to start a sequence of square knots here. And I do have a video showing how to do the macrame square knot, so I won't go into detail with it here in this video, just for the sake of the length of the video. So, and I usually start my square knot about 1/4 inch down, and of course it's going to gap right here, but once you get started with the square knot and get a couple sets in, or even just one set in, you're going to be at a pinch side. So as you know, the square macrame square knot is a series of P's and Q's. And I usually do a set of 3 complete square knots for my beginning point here. I can't believe Easter's just around the corner. I was taking pictures of some new beads, and they were little teardrop shaped beads, but they reminded me of Easter eggs. And then I started missing my grandkids. We die Easter eggs every year, and I haven't seen them in a while since we moved here, so I started to miss them. Now, another thing is on the cording, you can definitely pick cording that's closer to the color of your leather if you don't want it to contrast. Some people don't like the contrast, some people do. So that's completely up to you and what design you're wanting to go through. So now I'm going to bring in the large eye needles, which I love, and I am going to thread the cord. So it's right through the large eye open. It kind of splits open, and you don't need to string too much of a tail because it's going to pinch it in between there. And I am going to do the same on this side. So now both sides of the C-long cord has a needle. So we're going to come under and through the middle of the leather cords with each cord of S-long thread, I should say. I'll say thread, and then leather will be the cord. So now they're both coming up between the leather cords. And I like to gradually start the bracelets here at the beginning and work myself up into a bigger. I just think it looks nicer because if you start with a big one, there's usually a gap here. And I just think this looks visually better. That's just my opinion from doing this. So I'm going to take this is like a 4mm brass, I guess, saucer bead. And I'm going to take it doesn't matter which needle, if you're right or left hand, you can start on either side. I'm going to take one of the threaded ends with the needle on it, and you're going to come in through the outside of the bead here. Pull the needle all the way through. And you're going to release that needle, and you're going to bring this second needle in, and you're going to come in from the opposite direction and through the bead. Just like that. And then you're going to grab the ends with the needles on them, and you're going to pull, and that's going to bring that bead down. I got it tangled here. Untangle it. And so you can see that the bead is on the cord, and it's going to scissor it between that leather cord. And don't worry if it pops down, because once we get another bead on there, it'll pull it up. So now we're going to go under the leather cord and through the middle of the leather cord with both S-long threaded needles. So you have the cord coming up through the 2 cords of leather here. And I'm going to grab a round bead here. Oops, maybe. Coming through holding the bead and coming through the outer side of the bead with one needle, holding it, and then going through the opposite side with the other needle. And careful when you're doing this not to split the thread with the needle. You don't want to do that. It weakens the thread. And then you're pulling and bringing those beads in. As you can see, it's starting to pull the other bead up. And then we're going to go under and through the middle of the cords again with both needles. Getting ready you're just setting yourself up to get ready for the next bead. So now I'm going to grab one of these pink agate beads, 6 millimeter, and I'm going to go through outside with one needle. And I'm grabbing the other needle. And when you're doing this, make sure you give yourself room on either side because you're working with a lot of thread. You're having to pull it to the side. So make sure you give yourself some room there to work. So, and then I'm doing the same, bringing that down in there and dropping it in between. And then taking the needles and going under the leather cord and through the middle, getting prepared for the next bead or sequence of beads. Going to do another pink, coming in through the outside, one needle, and then the opposing outside and through. So let me pull this tight and I'll show you. It's crossing basically the threads. This is what the ladder stitch is. Get a good idea. And then I'm pulling it down and against the other bead. And then we're going to come under and through the middle with the thread. Needle on both sides, preparing for the next bead. Be another pink agate bead. Going through the outside. And then coming back with the needle. And if you're trying to avoid the thread, I always kind of push the end of my needle up against the bead and kind of scrape along it. That way I know I'm not splicing the thread with the needle head. And as you go, as you stitch, just keep your thread firm by pulling. It's going to loosen a little, but you just pull it with each bead and we'll keep those beads in line. You're going to have a little play in them. It's just the actual, the style of the bracelet. That's just how it is. But alrighty, I think I'm going to throw in. And a lot of times I'll take the beads that I'm thinking about doing next and I'll kind of put it in here and say, do I like that or not? And before I actually slide my needle up and through. And you're only limited by the whole size of your bead. So now this bead might not lay it might, once it's against this, then it'll come up, but it might not lay properly at first. But once it's flat and another bead is laying it, it will. Or I honestly don't fret about that too much. But I know some people like to be very orderly in the way that they're doing their arrangements and stuff of their beads. So I, however, do not mind a little disorder. In fact, I'm kind of used to it. Alrighty, so I'm going to start now, I think, with some blue. Going through the opposite sides with both needles. And I'll bring the camera in a little closer here so you can really see what I'm doing. Kind of second guessing that just because I don't know if that's going to poke and lay the way I want it to or not. And this is another thing, is you can back it out. Your design is not permanent. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking the needles off the thread so I can pull that dragonfly bead, because I just don't like the way that it's poking out and I just don't feel like it's going to be comfortable. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just rethread the needles with the Eslon and choose a different bead. I'm not worried about the frayed end of this either because it's going to be cut off anyway, because I always try to make sure that I cut more cord than necessary just so I have more than not enough. So I think I'm going to do stack then of different beads here. I like a lot of texture in my my jewelry designs. I don't know, it's just me. It's just me. I like when I'm like touching jewelry that it has different textures. I don't know. I might be weird. I like it to be visually interesting too. I don't like it to be matchy-matchy a lot of times because I just feel like it's more appealing when it's different. You have to kind of like, oh, that's neat. That different beads and textures and shapes, sizes and colors. So much to offer. Alrighty, now I like that much better. It's lying better, and it looks like stacked pebbles or rocks. So I'm going to go in from the opposite side and then through with the other needle opposing. So we're crisscrossing, and then we're going to bring that blue bead down, and then always going under and through the middle to prepare for the next sequence of beads or bead. I'll do another blue. I'll bring in the camera here after this one so you can really see what I'm doing here. And I'm just tightening as I go. I'm going to come in with the camera now. Ooh, that's a little too close, I think. A little better. Okay, so we're going under and through to prepare for the next bead. Both S-long cords, just bringing it up. I'm going to grab another blue and go through that way, bringing the needle, going through in the opposite direction, and grabbing those cords to bring the bead into alignment with the others, and giving it a firm tug. Then we're going to go under and through the middle with each needle, under and through, bringing the cords so they're both coming up through the middle of the leather cording. Alrighty, I'm going to do another stack of metal beads. To mirror the other section. So I'm pulling them through needle. Then this one's coming through the opposite direction to crisscross. Grabbing the threads. And I'm just going to pull those beads down between the leather cording. And then we're going to prepare for the next bead by bringing both needles under and through the middle of the leather cording. I think I'll go with some green here. Through. Bringing it down. And then needles are coming under and through the middle again to prepare for the next bead. through the outside with one needle, crossing over. Second needle comes in the opposing side through the bead, over, and then you're going to bring it down between the leather. And see how nicely, and also if you don't want to be too frustrated with this technique, choose round beads for your beginning, or cylinder beads, something or two beads like this that are going to give you a nice consistent pattern. That way then you're not having to work. But then once you get more fluid with the and more experience with the technique, you can really mix up the media, the different beads and everything. Same size beads, of course, lay better against each other than, say, if you were mixing it up with all different types of beads. We're going to go under and through, preparing for the next sequence of beads, which I'm going to do another stack of these metal beads. Those are stuck together already. Trying to hold on to those babies. All right, and then I am going through these, making sure I'm staying in frame here. Last one wants to be stubborn. All right, coming through, and then taking the ends and pulling down into the sequence of beads, pinched between the 2 millimeter round leather cord. We're doing under and through with the needles to prepare for the next bead. It'll be this kind of, it's kind of a orange, burnt orange color agate, and through. And then we're going to pull it down into, or between the leather cord. So we're going with the needles. After each sequence of beads or bead, you are going to be taking your needle up underneath the leather cord and through the middle. That's an important step. You don't want to miss that, or else the next bead will just pop right on out of between the leather, I should say. That's an important step. So I always, before I make sure that that is done before I start to thread the next bead on with the needles here. Or else you're going to have a mess. So under and through the middle. Ladder stitch is one of the easiest stitches to learn. You can do a lot with it. Yeah, you can do, these bracelets, you can do earrings, all sorts of stuff. Okay, and then I'm going to do another sequence of these organic shaped brass beads. Almost like nuggets. Cool though, I like the texture of them. All right, pulling this needle out through beads, so I can get them lined up. Then I'm going to come through the opposite end, the other needle, and pulling. Oh, look what I did. I forgot to go up and through the bottom, or did I, to show you? So this is what will happen if you do not go through it, under and through the middle of each bead. I just wanted to show you what it looks like. So you're basically only attached to the bead next to it, not the leather. So So I'm going to unstring the needles, and then I'm going to pull these beads loose. Pull the cording out. Easy fix. And I'm going to rethread the needles, which are super easy because they're the large eye needles that split open, which I love these things, especially when you're doing any kind of stitch work. All right. So now we're going to do the correct thing is we're going to go under and through the middle with each needle. Under and through the middle with each needle. Now we can string on these next sequence of beads. I did want to show you that so you could kind of, I mean, you can explain it, but I think visually you need to see it. So now we have them on the needles and it's properly strung on the leather, and we're going to go through the opposite. We're going to pull those down and look at the difference. See how that nicely snug down in there and it doesn't pop up. So now we're going to go under and through the middle, under and through the middle, and then I'm going to grab some more pink since we're starting. I'm just kind of making this easy for the video here by just repeating my design. And like I said, it doesn't matter which way you go through first. You can go, you know, just as long as you're doing opposing ends with the needles, it'll be fine. Then we are taking the needles and going under and through the middle, under the leather cord and through the middle, and preparing for the next bead. One needle through the there. This one through the opposite. And bringing it down. Under and through the middle, under and through the middle. I want one more pink bead, and then I will button this one up to show you the closing. And also you'll want to go pass through one needle, not at the same time. It just makes it too thick, the needles, because these needles are basically two pieces soldered at the end together, so they can get kind of thick if you try to pass them at the same time through the bead. All right, and then I'm going to grab one of these round brass beads here, same as I did on the other end. These little saucers. All right, we're going to come one needle up and under. We're going to do this twice for the end. Up and under, up and under. I'm going to take the needles off at this point. We don't need them anymore. Set them out of the way. Sure, you guys can see what I'm doing here. Now here's where I just tie an overhand knot before I start and I just get everything lined up and kind of snug. What I'll do is I'll put some tension on that and then give it a really good snug tie. So you just basically have an overhand knot holding that together. It's mostly for me, it's easier for me to then do the square knot. And then I will go and I will tie an overhand knot on the top side here. Make sure it gets down tight. Bring it down and then I'll kind of get in close here. Okay. And then I'm going to start my sequence of P's and Q's. I'm just using a little loop, eye loop, to hold up the cord so I can get underneath them for the sequence of square knots that I need to do. You can start the square knots without tying the overhand knots if you want to. You don't need to do that. I do that to keep it kind of in place. It makes it a little easier for me to finish the bracelet. So I usually do it. And also it's a nice security for in case something breaks, then you're going to stop there rather than the whole bracelet. Coming apart. And like I said, I do a series of, or excuse me, a set of 3 complete square knots. You can do more. I would not do less, just for to have the stability and the strength, the sturdiness of having the knots there. So now I'm going to bring in the thread burner. Do not throw away these cord ends yet. Just going to put them over to the side. We're going to use them. So what I do here is I melt the cord down, turn it so I can see, and I just use the thread burner to melt it down, and then I will use my finger to push it down, so it, basically doing what glue would do, because it's melted nylon and it creates its own glue there without the mess of the glue stringing around. Because let's face it, it can get kind of messy. Alrighty, so we're going to take one of these strands that we just cut off, and we're going to use it to make our button loop, or eye, I should say. Those together. And our button is a very beautiful check glass button, and I believe it's about 1.5 inches, oh, maybe 3/4 of an inch. So rather than, I mean, you can test the fit too, but I think I'm going to do an inch, approximately an inch opening for the button. And we're just going to do a series of square knots. I'm just going to make sure I got it about 1 inch. Yep. Alrighty, and I just did the half of a overhand knot, basically. There. And then I'm going to do another sequence of square knots. This is going to form the eyelet for the button, so like the fastener. And keep in mind, you can add charm bells before, slide it on before or after, or you can simply attach the charm to the leather itself anywhere along the bracelet that you choose or that you want the charm to be connected to. give you a little extra decoration. There. On my finger here. All right, and then I'm pulling these pretty snug here. Now I'm going to bring in the thread burner and I'm going to do the exact same thing I did earlier. Burning down the cord and giving it a little tap with my finger. Glues it down, secures it down. I'm going to take this off. And as you can see, I have plenty of leather for another eyelet. This bracelet will measure, this will fit a wrist at a between 7 and 8 inches because the eyelid slides that far. So that's perfect. I'm going to move the macrame board to the side. So now this is what we have here. And then you could go ahead and cut these off here if you chose to. You could add a, a bead at the end if you chose. Just make sure that when you're choosing the bead that it will accommodate the diameter of the leather, because it has to be able to slip on there. I, however, am just going to give them a snip. You can cut them at an angle if you choose, or straight off if you want, however long you choose to keep, do them. So you could eliminate probably about 3 inches of that leather for this particular size bracelet to save if you want. I always err on the side of caution and cut more. And then you're going to use the button as the clasp closure, or excuse me, the clasp at the end, the closure at the end. And you'll slide it through. And that is your bracelet. And you can use this technique to make multi-wrap leather and beaded bracelets. And that is what is called the ladder stitch. I'll bring in the other bracelets so you can see those. Different sizes, of course. And also you can form more eyelets if you choose on the bracelets themselves. All right, getting crazy with the zoom. But you can also, put dangles on, leave leather. I find it's a little more difficult with the 2mm leather. That's why I do like the 1.5mm leather too, is dangles are a lot easier, and also with the 1mm to make at the ends. You can also add charms like I did here. This is with a charm bell. Where's the other one? There's the other one. This one is attached directly to the leather. So literally it is that simple, and I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and if you did, please hit that like button, and if you haven't subscribed to our channel, do so. We are adding content regularly, and let me know if you have any questions or requests in the comment section below. Thank you guys, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.